Okay. Let's do a couple of things review. We're going to have to reprogram Wes's phone, so this will be a good review for that part. I'll just do it from up here, but I'll show you. I want to connect to his phone. The IP address of the phone should be right on the phone. It should always be there. We are using static addresses, and so his phone should be 114, and in fact it is. But if I didn't know that, I just look at the phone. Even DHCP is fine for working with this. So let me just see what we can do. 172.16.207.114. Is that correct, Wes? Is that on your phone? Okay, good. The password, the default password for all these phones is admin. And it brings you into here. And that's the way to make sure you keep moving, because if you don't, it's going to time out on you. A quick review on the screens. The status screen tells you what version of the operating system you are. It also tells your IP address, but you really couldn't get to the screen without typing in the IP address. And also your MAC address. MAC address may be important. You can actually copy and paste from here for documentation instead of having to flip the phone over. That kind of stuff. Under basic settings, and I waited too long. Under basic settings, this is what, oh, come on. Isn't it admin? Oh, don't log into it. You can only have one person log in at a time. I'm showing how to do it for the benefit of everyone. Yeah, you can only have one person log in at the time, so I wasn't waiting too long. I was getting knocked out. I'm going to remove your cable from your computer. Okay, the basic settings is where you do the IP addressing. IP address, it's a static one. By default, when you do a factory reset or do any kind of reset, it switches back to DHCP. And in some cases, that may be okay. It's kind of nice that way because you can plug it in anywhere. It picks up the network address for that network, and it still can traverse back to your server. I have always done static addresses with phones, though, usually related to the extension, just because if I want to work on that phone, I don't want to have to go to that phone and figure out the addresses of that moment. Any kind of network devices, and really this would be considered a network device, really should have some kind of static address so you know what they are. And there's pros and cons, so you think about it. You're all intelligent. It has all the IP addressing settings, IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. It does have DNS, even though nothing really is using DNS other than the firmware update, which is on the next screen. The only things we changed on the bottom here are time zone. Time zone is Greenwich Mean Time -6, and we do follow daylight savings time, and the rules just tell you when it starts and stops. There's documentation somewhere. You can have the backlight on all the time. This one's set to yes. That's fine. It makes it a little bit easier to read, especially in class. And you can adjust the contrast from here if you want, so if something's just not right. This is set, a 24-hour time frame. Wes, you probably switch that because you prefer the military. I'm going to switch it to 12-hour just to be consistent. And these really don't matter a whole lot down here. Click Update. Anytime you click Update, it's going to want you to reboot. You don't have to reboot every time. You can make multiple changes and then reboot to make the changes. Under Advanced Settings, there's a couple things that we do change on here. A lot of very detailed things here. I know these are phone specific, so you have to do this on every phone. It's kind of like rolling out PCs with specific settings for your network. You have to have this configuration for that environment. Let me see if I can remember all the things. The first thing is the firmware. The firmware server path is not the default. They've changed it since these phones have been created, and the new firmware path is firmware.grandstream.com. So every time you turn on your phone, it will look for an update. And this is set to check for updates once a week. So if a new firmware came out since last week, even though there hasn't been a new firmware in 2 years, just per chance, a new one comes out during the course of this class, you should all get it rolled out to the current version. We did talk about that, whether that's a benefit or not. We're just doing it during class. It may not be a good idea. because a firmware update can change settings. It's kind of like changing your operating systems on your computer. Would you want your computer to just be upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 8 over the weekend without testing? You might want to test the firmware, make sure it works with all of your features and functions that you've programmed, and make sure it doesn't change any of your other settings that could, disrupt your phone system. Especially on a large scale, you really, really want to control that. In a small environment, yeah, I run around with 20 phones, I can do that. I'm not getting around to 1,000 phones today, so you better make sure this stuff works before you roll it out. Let me just click on something to hopefully keep this alive. Phone book downloads, ringtones. A couple settings are down here that we do want to change because of what we're doing, what we did in class. And one is using quick IP mode, and we just clicked yes. We're not using that anymore. And in fact, it wouldn't be bad to even turn that off at this point so that you don't get confused. Oh, I hit pound and 114, that's working. Well, you're dialing his IP address. You're not dialing his phone extension through there. So that was just something we did during class. By the way, that's not a typical thing that you do in a phone system, is allowing the direct IP. It's almost like disabling peer-to-peer networking in a network. So you don't want that kind of communication to happen typically, but it's a good learning exercise. And I'll just click update just to keep it alive. Now I get to my accounts, and as long as I'm in here, I might even do a couple different accounts. So account 1 is what you should be using to connect to my server up here. This is the classroom, so they're all part of the same server. Before, the very first activity I had to do, I think, was to connect your own server, which is exciting as it is. That's having a one workstation network. It's kind of like what you do in Windows Server class, where you create a client, and you create a server, and you log in. Well, that's exciting to a point, but you can't call anybody because you're the only person on the network. We're going to, do that a little bit differently today. We'll work with the other extensions so that you can have multiple people on there and sort of work with each other. It's going to stretch your mind a little bit on accounts and how this works. But I definitely want account 1 to be set up for the classroom server so that we're all part of the same network. So as we demonstrate things, I can show you how it works on a full-scale system, and then you get to play in your rows or groups or however you can do that. The account name can be anything that you want. It doesn't make any difference what it is. In fact, you can make it just the extension if you wanted 114. The SIP server is very important. This is, by the way, this screen is just like a user logging in to a network. You need a server. What server am I logging into? Well, I'm going to log into this server, which would be 172.16.207.0, and that just happens to be the server address for here. Now, what's really nice in a corporate environment is that you would have that listed in DNS, and so you would have things like sip.go-to-ltc.edu or voip.go-to-ltc.edu, and remembering names like that is a whole lot easier than trying to remember, what's that IP address again? Oh, no, it changed last week. No, this is the new IP address. So using DNS is very flexible and very helpful. We don't have that, so we're doing IP address. So that's the server I'm logging into, and now I need to have the username from what I'm logging into. And that is your extension. So when I create the accounts, in Elastix, and for this specific example, when I go to all these extensions, when I have these extensions of like 114, 115, 121, that's the same as creating users on a server. Bob, Sally, Mary, and that's the username for the person. Now I need a password for that user, and what did I choose? I can't remember. That is who you're trying to log in from, and here's the secret, and it's password. So don't tell anybody. For security reasons, it doesn't display it. That's because it's displayed in plain text over here. So you can't display it in plain text both places. So, now this is the phone side. This is like the node side. People can get access to this. And if they could see this, then obviously, seeing a password would be bad. Your servers should be secured. No one should be able to log in here. I still completely disagree that this should be plain text. But that's the way it is. So yes, yes. Account name doesn't make any difference at all. I could put pickles. No, doesn't mean anything. It could just be pickles. It could be icy. It could be the sky is blue. It means nothing. The only things that really matter are the SIP server, what you're logging into, your username, which is your extension. So I'm logging in with account 114 or 301 or 273 or whatever, and then my password. So it actually is every other line. That's my server, my user's password. Now it does go blank. It's there, I saved it, but you won't even see it. In fact, you don't even see asterisks on there. So again, if I designed it, I would do, password set or do something indicating that there's something there. It gets confusing that way. So account name, it can be anything. There's no effect on anything for account name. The last thing is name, and the only thing that matters there is that's going to show up on the phone itself. So if I put, is Wes with two S's? Okay, and I can put Wes. I'm going to put the extension number on there just because when you look at the phone, it's kind of nice to see what the extension is. Well, I don't know. I'll do Wes. Why not? What the heck? No, I'm going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Nope, I'm going to keep them all the same, 114. Okay, sorry. Okay, so that's going to show up on the phone. That has nothing to do with the server. The server is the server username password. That everybody has 207.0 and everybody has password. And that's only though because I set the password to this. Ideally, just like in a server environment, you might want to have different passwords for different users. Now, the user can't change their password like in a server environment, so you can't say like, oh, you know what, I'm extension 131, and I want to change my phone's password. It doesn't quite work that way. So my analogy of the Windows Server thing only goes so far, but it's a very, very strong relationship. This is a client-server environment. These are clients. This is a computer. It's an operating system. It has a NIC. It has an IP address, a MAC address. It needs a username. It needs a password. It needs to know where it's logging into. Okay? So I go through all this. There's a couple other things I do want to change in the bottom. Unregistered SIP, nothing here, nothing there. This is going to be important, the send DTMF, which is dual tone multi-frequency. If you ever listen on a phone, like when you push a button, it's actually a grid of tones. Each row has a tone, and each column has a tone. And when you push a button, you actually get two tones, one for the column and one for the row. That's how it knows what button you're pushing. And our phone system supports the RTP, so that's the kind of DTMF that we need to send. Doesn't matter, just click it. If you don't, we're going to be doing automated attendant probably next week, and you'll be pushing 2 for customer service, and it's not going to do anything. So most likely, if it doesn't do 2 to do customer service, it's most likely that that is not checked in your account settings. Okay, moving on down. This call log. It says log all calls, which is inbound and outbound and missed calls. Now on maybe your cell phone, that's a nice feature, and maybe your home phone, that's a nice feature. When you're working with the phones that we're working with, and you were working with like ring groups or maybe like a help desk, or we're doing like a customer service or a sales department, everybody's phone rings. It's who gets it first. And if somebody picks up the phone, that means you're going to have a missed call. Well, you weren't even there. You didn't pick up the phone, or you were there, but somebody else picked it up first or something like that. And if you're gone for lunch, you'd have 100 missed calls, but all of them were taken by somebody. And you could go through and clear your logs all the time, but very, very confusing. It's just much nicer to either disable call logs or at least disable the missed calls, so you can still see the calls that you took and the calls that you made. So again, just for a benefit as far as this scenario where you have multiple people accessing it, at once. Let's see. Moving on down. Ring times. Send anonymous. We have auto answer. I'm sorry, not an auto answer. Allow auto answer by call information. We do want to have that. Later on, we'll be working with paging and intercomming. That means that your phone's going to answer automatically when I send a page call. And that's kind of the idea. You don't have everybody's phone ring and everybody grabs the receiver to listen to a page. The idea is that it does just talk to you. Same with intercom. If you were doing this also, these kind of go hand in hand. When it's done, you want them to turn off the speaker automatically. Otherwise, you trigger the speaker on, and then it stays on until the person turns their speaker off or hangs up their phone. What this does is whenever the person at the other end disconnects from you, your speaker automatically disconnects as well. Even if you don't use paging and intercom, that's not a bad feature to enable. Otherwise, you end up having your phone off hook by mistake. You may not realize it. And we can pretty much leave everything else down there. I click update, and I waited too long. Way too much talking. Sorry. Okay, so I already saved that, so I just have to make these changes up here. This one, and this one, and this one. And then update. And again, once you hit update, those things are written, so I didn't have to go back. As long as we're in here, well, you know what? Let's just make sure we're working at this point. Let's see if we can get Wes's phone working here. Yeah, I don't know why his is registered still. Now it's off. $115. Marco, are you rebooting, or were you up? You were up before, weren't you? Yeah. Oh, okay. Are you setting it up? Okay. I'd like you to be setting up a phone system within your group. So somebody has to choose whose server you're going to use. Probably somebody in the front row that you're working with, so everybody can see what's going on and how you're doing it. So the person whose server you're going to be working on, I want you to create the extensions for your server. Now remember that you can have the same extensions in your server as I do as mine. Just like if I have a server up here called, server 1, I could have the users Bob and Sally. If this is server 2, I can have Bob and Sally as well. Now how that works with our phones is that you could all have extension 100, 101, 102, or whatever you want to have that. So go ahead and create like extensions, 100 through 104, and then 105 on your servers. In fact, all of you create 100 through 105 on your servers just for the practice of creating accounts. And then I'll show you how to connect your phones together to do that using additional lines. Don't change line 1. I'm sorry I'm jumping around here. So everybody on your servers, on your Elastix server, under PBX configuration, click on extensions, and make sure you have extensions 100 through 105 just to create them. Give everybody his password as password. Should we review those things of how to create an account? Getting some perplexed looks. So we'll take a look at one. So I'll click, you get to add extension. So under PBX configuration, I click on extensions. And I want to add an extension. So I click submit. And I'm going to create the account 102. So the extension is the username. That's what they log into. So that would be 102 because I already have a 100 and 101. The display name is what it shows up. Now, in this case, I had Paul or Paul2 show up over here, and on all your control panel things, it sort of tells who the user is. This, not having to keep track of everybody that way, I just use the extension as the display name. So I'll just use 102. Account to? We'll get to that. I'll just sort of walk you through that. Yes. And then we go down to secret, which would be password. And I believe that was all we had to add. Now remember, you can add all your accounts, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, but none of them actually get created until you click this big pink banner that says Apply Configuration Changes Here. So it's going to show up on the list, it's just not going to be active. And now it's going to be active once you have those created. I can. Add the one I just did? It's going to look a little different if you come back to edit them. So, to create a new one, okay, go to Extensions. I click Submit on Add an Extension. User extension is the extension that you want to create. It's basically the username of the server. The display name is sort of our friendly name. That's what's going to show up in the phone book, on the address list. That's what's going to show up in all the control panel things. And again, since we'll have different people doing different accounts, we'll just use a generic display name. You do have to have both of these. It's kind of like in the Novell server, if you put that, you had to have a username and a last name in order to make an account. That's just the way it is. So user extension is the account, display name is how it shows up. And then going down to secret, the secret would be password or whatever password you're going to be doing. Just be careful. In real life, your secret should be extremely secure, because if somebody gets a hold of that SIP password, they can make calls on your account. And they can use any device anywhere and call anywhere and do anything that your phone service allows, and they can really rack things up. And just double checking, nothing at this point. While you're working on those, let me just show you a couple of things. If I do go back into the account, it's not the same screen. I get a different screen when I edit account as opposed to creating an account. I have a lot more features. Device options, which I did not have. There's call groups and pickup groups, which we probably won't get to. But basically, you can pick up or answer phones for other people in your group. But you have to be part of the same group number. So that's the equivalent of Windows workgroups. So you can have multiple work groups, and how you join with that. Deny or permit who can actually log on. So you can give a static address. So the only account that can log on to this account is in fact the IP address 172.16.172.114 if you wanted to. Makes it a little bit more secure, so if somebody comes with a random device, they can hijack an account. Again, that's a little more advanced. We probably won't get into that. That's about it, I guess. Yes? Oh, no, let me back way up. How do I get to this screen? This is my, sorry, this is my Elastix server. It's just sort of there in black and sitting there not doing anything. You turn it on, you just let it sit. If I click on it and I hit enter, I did log into it. You can log into it using root and then password, and that's going to give you your IP address of the server if you didn't know what it was. Now, ideally, you would know your IP address of your server, so you shouldn't even have to log in. You just turn on the machine and just let it sit in the corner and do its own thing. So if you see the IP address, you should have something like 172.16.207.13. Is that okay? Just your machine number. Okay. So 13. So then you'll be 14, 15, and 21, so forth. So everybody just sort of that should be something in the front of your notebook or the top of the class. How do I get to my server? So you shouldn't even have to get to the screen. Once you do that, then you go to a web browser. A regular web browser. You can use Internet Explorer. I'm using Chrome, and you type in that IP address. Again, if you had DNS, it'd be really nice that I could just do, VoIP dot, go to ltc.edu, and that would bring it to me. I don't have it enabled, so I have to use the IP address of 172.16.207.0. Now I'm actually logged into it. If I go way to the right upper right-hand corner, I can log out. Just so it's what the screen looks like. Then to log in, the default username is admin. And the default password is what you created, which should be password. If you put something else on there, good luck. And it brings you to the dashboard. And this tells you how your CPU is doing, your RAM, your swap file. Linux is big on swap files. My hard drive, how much you're using, your processor. It actually tells you your calls, simultaneous calls, memory, and CPU usage all in one chart. You just have to read what is what. Red is memory, so I'm using 200 megs of memory. I'm using about 3% of CPU, and I've had no simultaneous calls so far. I haven't done a whole lot, I guess. And then this is just general news. This screen is completely customizable. This is the dashboard applet admin. We're not going to mess with that. All of the stuff that we're working with, at least the PBX side, is on the PBX tab. So there's a tab up in the top center for PBX. This is where we're doing all of our stuff on all these different areas here. Once I get into PBX, I'm on PBX configuration by default, and by default it is on extensions. So add extension is the default screen. I want to add an extension, so you just click submit, saying yes, I do want to add an extension, and then you go through that screen. Then you put the extension. Let me do another one, 104. Display name, what's going to show up on everything, all the reports or whatever. It'll often look like this. It'll have the display name with the extension in brackets behind it. So you're not going to lose the extension number. So you always know that was extension 101 or whatever. But the display name is going to be what's showing up. And then the only thing else that you have to enter is, about a third of the way down, is the secret setting, which is the password. And again, making this very secure normally. And I click submit. Okay? And then make sure that anytime you have a pink banner, that you probably want to click on it to, apply the changes that you've done. You don't have to do it after every extension. You can do, 100 extensions and then apply. You don't have to create extension, apply, create extension, apply, create extension, apply. Yeah, after you create the user, you do have to click submit on the bottom, but you don't have to click apply across the top until you're done with all of them. But you do have to click submit after each one. Oh, that'd be cool. Actually, there is a way. It's over here. Well, we're not going to do it that way, but it says batch of extensions. If I click on there, you can do an import. If you have an Excel spreadsheet, you can have all your extensions done, which is, by the way, how I do it for class. I have a spreadsheet, and I just upload the spreadsheet, and it has all the accounts with all the stuff in it. Let me see if I can find that for you real quick, what it looks like. Oh, I don't have it locally. You can also download the current extension list in CSV file to see what it even looks like. It might be a really good backup to have once you have 100 extensions. So I download it. extensions.csv. And you can name it by what date you did it, or what department it was, or what company it was. And this is what it looks like. The display name, user extension. There's a couple other things like call waiting or whatever, but secret is password, and there's other settings. That's about it. Yep. You set up this as a CSV file, or you create an Excel file. Make sure you export it as CSV, and make sure you have the different columns. So I could select this whole one right here, select that row, copy it, paste it, change the last one to extension 144. Well, there's already 144. Bad example. Let's do 300. The user extension would actually be 300. And I want that password to be password 300. So that would be the setting. All the rest of the stuff is as defaults. I could upload this into my server, and it would have that new extension and so forth. Yes, yes. Yep. But that's not as much fun. So the important part is making sure it's a CSV file. Sometimes when it's imported into Excel or whatever, it converts it. It gets really weird. It has to be a true CSV file. And that I've actually had some difficulties with that, of making sure it stays a CSV and doesn't get converted to something else. And your export, yeah. When you import it in, make sure, yeah. But again, a little bit more. If you can create the extensions, that's the most important part. Realize that there is that feature to do the batch stuff, though. If like, oh my word, how am I going to do that? They don't take that long to create. You enter 3 fields and you're done. Yep. Okay, once you are done creating your 5, 6 extensions on your server, and everything's fine, and your phone is still connected to my server, and you have all your software updated and anything else that you're missing, you may take a break.